Hello,
Man,
and welcome to
awkward.
Gears of Misogyny, Part 4.
We hear you, little guy. Hunker down and shields up. Kilo, protect the bot.
I am your current host as I show how chauvinistic pigs men are by telling me to go and do my business back in the kitchen because nobody wants to hear what a female says.
Absolutely.
And everybody, we're not gonna let that go because that line was just god awful. And what the fuck?
Fucking out of nowhere too. It's so inconsistent, like I mentioned.
Like,
Man, also, this is the longest trial testimony ever, right, Joe?
well, you can't leave
we've
out
seen
any
Ace Attorney
detail.
shenanigans before, so
But this is also one of the most boring Phoenix Wright tests.
So
you know what? They have to say everything they do in every single detail. I shot, then I ducked, then I shot, then I ducked, and then I spun around,
then I missed.
and I fired.
Dudes, I hate to say it, welcome to what's probably closer to real life court.
It's like an unexciting Persona 5, you know, where the protagonist tells the events of glory in excruciating detail.
Oh, Dwibs, I fear for you if you ever get picked for jury duty, then.
Oh boy.
Let me just say this. Ace Attorney, even though it is closer to Japanese law, still makes court look more exciting than it usually actually is.
Well, yeah, that's his entire job to make, to manage to accomplish making a video game experience of a court of law exciting.
Which is in and of itself a feat.
If I wanted a realistic one, I'd play a bloody courtroom simulator if there is such a thing.
Ooh, what does that do?
Well, it's a crossbow, so I'm assuming it shoots arrows. I mean,
Well, okay.
Well, it's called tripwire, so maybe it's similar to stuff like Ratchet and Clank also has a similar tool where you plant two nails on the ground and it creates an electric current between them and functions as a trap.
too
Basic,
bad I'm done here anyway.
basic
Oh.
rule of thumb, Pedro. Just because something's called a crossbow doesn't mean it's a simple crossbow, especially in video games.
I think even Evil Within has a weapon similar to
Whatever
that.
equipment we can.
Oh yeah, and that one is surprisingly one of the better weapons too.
I may not have a phone, but you don't have a crossbow, and I thought everybody had one of those.
Is that a Deadly Premonition quote?
No, it's an Adam's Family joke. Okay, so helicopter.
Extraction point.
My extraction point.
It's my ass.
I couldn't understand.
Oh no, excretion point.
And now you've got me imagining Hunk in a Gears of War situation.
Near the wreckage, at least.
Who?
Oh,
Hunk, human unit something killer.
great! More horde mode.
Horde mode? Well, I never actually played the multiplayer, so I don't know that.
It's what we call these segments where you have to basically fight in waves.
In general, Pedro, horde mode is a common thing for quite a lot of games. Even something that are not strictly shooters. You know, the fact that you have to seed your ass in a location and just mow down the waves of enemies that arrive with you. It's not even when you're not having an escort mission, like you have to defend a target or tower defense.
Snap.
What the hell? Oh, it's an emergency hole. A simple horde mode is just having to, staying in one location and having to wait until horde. Complete with a timer that tells you how long it is for the next one.
Also, I cannot get around how jarring it is how the characters act so different when they say certain lines that clearly were probably meant for the multiplayer instead. Like, again, our female protagonist here, despite being shown as a rather somewhat, rule-following person, acts a lot more spunky with her voice lines when we play as her.
Maybe it's because they're going for the whole, kind of like how in such, depending on the story you're playing, the dialogue changes to accommodate that character's perspective. So maybe she's telling this from her perspective, so that's why she sounds a lot better and cocky in her testimony.
I guess the weird thing is, though, it kind of clashes with how she's been trying to present herself to the tribunal. Like, for the most part, she seems to be the one who tries to follow orders more, yet Here, she acts way more cocky here and there. Like, maybe that
Get
is...
this unreliable narrator.
Maybe it is supposed to be, like, a sense where, it's from her perspective, but it kind of feels jarring. Like, well, it's kind of like if Resident Evil characters had their spunky lines from, like, the additional modes, which are a lot more plucky if they put them in the main campaign, where obviously that sort of stuff isn't really called for, considering the gravity of a situation.
So yeah, it can. So yeah, basically we have to once again protect Jack from all the moves.
Oh, so horde mode and an escort mission. Neat.
Joyful.
So much that it's exporting, like he's there doing something.
Well, it's the
and
basic
we have
premise of what's the basic premise of escort mission? We'll keep him from getting killed.
Just because your target is not your target, your protege is not moving, yeah, it's still an escort mission.
Sure.
Hey, at least it's not like Eco.
Well, Eco plays more on a mobility factor rather than having to brute force your way through. You can potentially. Sorry, go on.
The big difference between those two jobs is that I'm not actually really supposed to care about the bot that I'm protecting. He's mostly just a tool. Like, it's not like in Gears 4. Sorry, it's not like in Gears 5 where they actually do try to give him a bit more personality. The bot is just basically a plot device and anything, whereas you caring about your is the whole thing that game is trying to do, and it kind of doesn't work for me, so it's kind of becomes a problem there.
Well, that's why I said, at least it's not like Eco, which apparently annoys you.
Well, I mean, the problem with Eco is that it's less refined than Last Guardian in terms of its puzzle design. Like there's quite some bits of the gameplay in Eco haven't quite aged well, really.
No, to Eco was literally like, that.
Fumito Ueda and Kenji Kaido's first game,
Yeah.
It was basically Last Guardian Alpha for Jova. Think of it like that.
And even so, remember, Jova, like the game was sold production for the Seiko meeting, the initial period launch of the PS2, that almost the entire plot was cut away and most definitely part of the gameplay as well.
It's funny. Despite these characters not having the most character, it is neat how the game kind of attributes things to each of them when you play as them. Because like Pedro said, apparently the way that they amend the story to match doing certain missions apparently does sort of tie into them character-wise. Like Baird absolutely just tries to fluff up the story to make himself look better, and what's this girl's name again?
Exactly. It's Sophia.
Sophia here goes for a lot more of a well-oriented method, while still potentially making herself look poor. Again, we're assuming that, it's intentional that they put in those all of a sudden spunky lines for her.
So by that logic, Jova, I had to expect that when the Gorazni takes over in narrating the story, it will be very dry and very boring, even more than usual.
I understand your point, Joe, but at the same time, let's face it, we should have left strategy to men with bars. But anyway, no, like Jova said, yeah, the structure of this game is sound. What really screws it up is the writing, which took a severe downgrading quality from the previous game.
Yeah, and not even, the character dialogue. The character dialogue is fine, but the overall story, the problem with the story is that it doesn't give the characters as much room to breathe, at least from what I've seen so far. Now, granted, maybe it'll get better later on, but from what I've seen so far, while the characters are well enough fine, I do kind of worry that we won't get to see them shine, and I don't necessarily mean in the sense where, they have to be amazing characters, but looking back at the original Gears trilogy, each character had at least some moment in time where they were allowed to shine brightly. Marcus was the main hero, Dom got his major sacrifice in 3, and hell, the stuff of his wife in 2, Cole got a lot of focus himself, even Baird got a few times to shine by pulling off some technological marvels here and there. And
that was supposed to be the tails of the group anyway. He's meant to be the tech guy, and he's the one that has the most sarcastic quips as well. So he's meant to be the sarcastic dick. But I mean dick as in likable dick.
That's kind of my
Like,
main point, is like, well, okay, so yeah, each of them had big moments to shine because they got some pretty great character actions here. The characters here, while yes, the snark is there, I have a bad feeling that they may not get such great establishing character moments or an amazing bout each of them. Again, maybe they will, but, you know, I'm just judging off of what I've seen so far.
Unfortunately, Joe, remember, as we all know, not so much, because remember, we kind of already know in advance how things are going to go through, because, you know, remember, we're still in media res.
Again. I mean, I guess we technically know that Sophia and what's the Russian guy?
And that was it. The
What?
grubs left us alone for
His
a
name
little
is
while.
Paddock.
Paddock, yeah.
Leaving the academy.
UK,
Right,
Paddock.
yeah.
Someone
How's
has to
that,
go
that's how they
back
pronounce it
there
in the
and
game,
bury
at least.
No, that's the thing. You cut it out for a second.
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so we know that those two will survive since we see them in the tribunal here and there. But I mean, I guess we could hope that maybe one of them will get an amazing big heroes moment. Big damn heroes moment where they crash in to save the day. Oh, and we're done with Sophia's already.
Paddock. Are you here as Major Paddock of the UIR? Or
The UIR is the Soviet
The
Union,
Gorazny.
the Soviet Union equivalent of
the Open Arms
this episode.
program may have given you our uniform.
So even in space there's a Soviet Union.
Let's settle this like enemies then.
Get it? He's the Maverick.
Stand down.
Say, is there a Carmine to die in this game too?
You garage
No,
men
there's no
know
Carmine in
treating
this game.
prisoners very well.
Wow, that's a clear sign that this game is a cardinal sin then.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. You don't seem like a man who takes orders.
Wow, I've heard this in like almost every old police cop drama before. Please, go on.
Let's say I had an ulterior.
That too! What's next?
Alright,
I'll have your badge for this, or you're a loose cannon, but you get results,
Adult's
damn it.
testimony.
I'll get back to you in the final part, Joe.
So, Tio, I guess this means now you'll be introducing the parts.
Alright, Theo, from this point on, you're up, I guess.
Man, Sophia's felt weirdly short in comparison, like...
Well, Joe, but let's face it, like the Colonel said, we should leave strategy to men with bars, so...
Damn.
Like, even the game itself is practicing what it preaches, it seems. God damn it. And trust me, Jova, when we get to the Aftermath campaign that explains what happens to
The grubs
Sophia,
tore this
yeah,
neighborhood
like, it's
apart.
pretty clear that the writers don't really give a crap about this character.
Aftermath campaign, is that in Gears 4?
We are not.
It's in this one.
He mentioned that it's the one thing that you unlock by, you know, completing all the challenge.
Not all the challenges, just enough so you can get 40 stars. I already did before. I already did in the previous playthrough, so that's already been done.
Again,
Unlike
audience,
the-
for context's sake, our recordings of this game tend to be spread out between sessions in comparison to some of our other playthroughs, so we may not always remember certain details spoken of which back then. You were saying?
Alright. Hold on.
Ooh, blood mounts.
Alright, but no, that's the thing, Joe. Unlike Gears 3, the bonus mini campaign is actually already included in the base game instead of it being DLC.
Huh, how nice of them.
And like I said, it's the Aftermath is what Baird and Cole were doing during that period in Gears 3, where we were in the Ghost Town point. So again, you'd think that would have been the DLC campaign of 3, but what do I know?
I already told you why it's probably like this.
Yeah. I don't know. You'd think they would, you know, have that hindsight, considering they've been pretty clever up until that point. But oh well.
Maybe they just literally hadn't thought of the Aftermath campaign around then, back at the time. And then when they did think about it, they figured, let's attach it to this game. Of course, that would mean that that means that they're assuming that anyone who's buying this prequel, which, mind you, usually gives people the idea that, oh, if I play this happens beforehand, so this kind of assumes that you played the original trilogy before playing this prequel.
Well, yeah.
need
The
to
Aftermath
moving.
campaign starts with a little previously on Gears of War 3 little thingy that catches you up to what Cole and Baird are trying to do. However, it doesn't spoil anything from Gears 3, so that's nice.
Yeah.
What I no, but my only real issue is that I don't know. Like, so let me get this straight. They didn't come up with the Aftermath back then, but instead they weren't able to come up with the Aftermath back then, but they were able to come up with that incredibly irrelevant Rom's Shadow storyline that doesn't have any impact on any.
Like I said, experimental. And like I said, the Aftermath campaign may be just an answer to, fans' feedback. So they never had that idea until they actually received the input from the fans.
I guess.
As someone who's worked on game projects, I can see why, someone's focus would be on this one thing and not on another at the very point in time.
Hey, Cole, do you have anything to contribute to our current predicament? No? Okay, then.
Does he have his own testimony?
He does.
Alright, then we'll see later then.
I think a bit of an issue I have with the story is also how they kind of use the different characters to literally jump to different points in the plot. Like, it's like, okay, 1 minute we're in the city, then next we just skip to here. It kind of makes it feel a bit disjointed. Like, compare this to the original Gears trilogy, where each of them felt like a well-connected journey. Like, where we had rather interesting and varied transitions from level to level. Especially with Gears 2, which, had us going inside a giant worm, which took us for a while here, eventually to a truck, which took us to the abandoned hospital in town, and the train and whatnot, and so on and so forth. Whereas here, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it feels less connected.
I think it's the other issue as well is that most of the dialogue is just exposition because of the testimony framework that they're trying to tell the kernel. Because of that, a lot of the dialogue, specifically the narration, boils down to exposition. Yeah, there's the occasional quip here and there. The problem is it's not quite enough. Like these characters, like Baird is the writing is at its best in this game when Baird is testifying. Since right after Shori manages to do some great work even with the lesser writing that he's given. But the other, especially Ali Hillis, is given little to nothing to work with.
She is literally just a soldier.
The game both in and out of universe is against her.
Like, seriously. Okay, character-wise, she's literally just a soldier who wants to follow orders and doesn't really argue against them. I mean, granted, okay, realistically, yes, that's someone who you want on your team. But character-wise, it kind of just leaves her bland. Yeah, but hey, I'm sure that later games will do much more with her, right?
Surely. Okay, I mean, she never shows up in Gears 1 and 2, and by the time the Aftermath campaign happens, we explain what happens to her, and let's just say Liz is not going to like it.
We'll get to that.
Someone dies off screen.
Yeah, she dies off screen.
Was hoping to save that, but yeah.
How nice. Well, trust me, Jova, even the game itself doesn't really try to make this like a big tragic reveal or anything. The game itself doesn't even seem to care that much, and neither do we for that matter.
Like, so... I literally just want to know, what was the point of Sophia as a character? Like, it wasn't to talk about, oh, there's some genders...
She's a female character. That's the only interpretation I can take, to be honest.
So, pretty much like Alicia in the Gears... In Rom's Shadow. I mean, I think the annoying thing about Sophia is like, well, she feels like a Carmine in a sense. Only just we actually see her face when you get down to it.
I guess I can give credit that unlike Alicia, Sophia got more lines.
Yeah, I think.
So, was that?
Okay. You know what? Sophia literally feels like a Carmine, only done worse. Because see, with Carmine, yes, he's a newbie trying to follow orders and he dies. But we actually do get something compelling because he seems like a genuinely nice guy trying to do what's right. Whereas Sophia, it's literally just follow the mission. There's no tragic backstory behind why she's so hell-bent to follow the mission. There's no, oh, she's dreamed about this her whole life. It's literally just follow the mission, follow the mission. I'm gonna die now.
Another thing that I find it interesting about the story is that there's some details that I think should have been explained that don't really get explained. Like, for example, the cog did give Paddock an armor, a suit of armor, and a lancer to help out, because apparently there's some kind of temporary truce with the UIR and the cog. Okay, can you explain that a bit more? Like, why exactly is the cog desperate because of something?
I actually thought it was actually something more taken for granted. The emergence of the Locust during E-Day basically had stopped all the animosity between the cog and the Gorazni. Sorry, the Gorazni and the other people involved in the Pendulum War, and we actually had to settle their differences to fight, with each other.
Except not quite, because from the comics we know that,
I get the animosity, I get the, not trusting completely each other, but to the point of saying, oh, even the entire premise of this game is asinine. Like, literally, we have no time for this trial. Why all these formalities and shit?
I think part of the issue as well is like, well, the way that they introduce Paddock, well, more so the way the judge introduces Paddock, feels like maybe I should know more about this. Now, thankfully, from the comics that we read from our Gears 1 playthrough, yes, I do know enough, but imagine that you hadn't read those comics. Now, we can talk about the comics being needed or not for the original trilogy, but for the most part, they're handled fine without the comics. But by this point, yes, the comics were well and truly there, but this is the first game that feels like it actually relies on the comics to some extent, because I'm sorry, unless you know who the UIR are, you're pretty much just gonna be left wondering, okay, some animosity between Paddock and the others. Now, granted, I guess we could assume that because he's Russian, UIR is supposed to be some allegory for the Soviet Union, but I don't know. Even then, it feels odd.
It's a reference to the Pendulum Wars. Again, a prequel trilogy would have solved this problem. But that's exactly the thing. Yeah, Tail brings up a good point. The premise in general is very dumb. I get it. Yes, there's still some animosity, but like Tail said, there's no time for this shit. Like, we can do this later.
Like, here's the point. It's literally a trial. Here's an idea. Why not have this just be a genuine story here? One where you could have the characters actually be able to explain stuff well and truly full. Like, I get not being able to show everything because of budget here and there, but by God, there should be some points where you can slow down and stuff. The problem, obviously, is that for the setting that the heroes are telling the story in, obviously they don't have that time because, well, they're already risking their lives as it is, having a tribunal in a collapsing building which is under attack. It's like the story is purposely shooting itself in the foot, purposely making a setting where, yeah, they can't really slow down to explain a thing to us.
I think it's pretty obvious that without Cliff and other team members, the remaining leftover members plus people can fly didn't quite know what to do when it came to the campaign. So they just kind of winged it, and there you go.
It really does feel like a situation where they don't know what to do, so they go, okay, let's do this.
Yeah. Because this premise in general, like the concept of the very idea of the premise is so weird. Like, why go this direction in particular? Like who exactly thought, you know what we should do, guys? We should do a Gears of War game where the entire game is just a testimony, testimony in the middle of a freaking war, where there's war going outside, and the very idea is just kind of ridiculous.
Well, giving a flashback sequence, I actually can understand, but you have to use a better way to convey it, in a sense that this could have easily just be a story that Baird was telling to Marcus, in a more calm setting. He said, oh, my team was doing this before I actually met you, stuff like that. Yeah. That way you can have the medias res and, having the flashback being told, with Marcus being a surrogate for the audience, Marcus saying, well, who is this person? What happened to them, you know, after, before we met you and Cole, you know?
Not only that, but here's another problem with the story here and there. It doesn't feel like something that lends itself to a lot of character conflicts. Like, okay, yeah, there's this whole thing about, oh, is Paddock on our side or their side? But let's be honest, does the story really lend itself to him supposedly betraying them? No, it doesn't, because the Locusts are that bad a threat.
Like I mentioned in the first Gears run, the setting itself doesn't lend to a type of twist like that. Oh, there's a spine or meats and stuff like that. Locusts are just that ignorant like this.
Yeah, they are vile, disgusting creatures that will murder and rip apart any human. Like, no human has any real motive to want to work with them. Pendulum Wars or not.
So yeah, everybody, tune in next time where I don't remember if we finish Paddock's testimony in the next part, but I think we do, but don't quote me on that. See you, everybody.
Yeah.
See ya.